This lesson covers the utilization of pivot tables for business analysis. There are often times that a business manager needs to quickly consolidate numbers to create charts and graphs. When dealing with a small set of data, this is often a simple task. However, let's take this example. A manager of a trucking company needs to summarize how many miles a tire lasts before it needs replaced, i.e. the tread no longer meets federal standards. So 100 semi-trailers are chosen at random, and one tire off of each truck is also chosen at random. And the number of miles for this tire is recorded. This gives us 100 data pieces. Now, if you were to give that list of 100 data pieces and expect your manager to make a quick decision, probably wouldn't happen. What they're most likely looking for is some sort of summary, like a chart or a graph to go along with it. So if you'll notice on here that we have a frequency chart. So a frequency chart counts the frequency, so we have 100 tires that have been recorded, and what bin they fall in. So in this case, 3 tires fell between 50,000 and 52,999. 13 tires fell between 53,000 and 55,999. So on down the line, and we can see where the highs and the lows and where most of them fall at, etc. A histogram on your right is basically a graphic representation of that very same data. At very quick glance, you can see the bulk of them lasted between 56,000 and 58,999. Lots of good business decisions could be made off of this. So why is it a histogram? It is a histogram because it is continuous data, so therefore we don't have any spaces between our lines, and because we're counting the frequency of how many fell into each bin. So how do we create these frequency charts and histograms? In order to do that, we're going to be using Excel. Now, there are 3 ways in Excel to do this. Number 1 is to use a pivot table. Number 2 is using the histogram function on the data analysis add-on. And number 3 is to use frequency formulas. For the purpose of this course, let's see how many times we can actually use pivot tables to summarize the data, because in the end it's a much faster way of doing it, because you can lump data together, you can tear it apart, you can do many different things with pivot tables at a very quick speed. So what we're going to find is this is our data set. If you'll notice on here, we have our data. So one of the tires lasted 61,000 miles, rounded down to the nearest thousand. If we go down and we look at our 61st tire that was done, it lasted 58,000 miles, and so on down the line till we have all of our 100 sets of data there. So I'm going to go to the top, I'm going to hit end, and then I'm going to hit up. So we're going to go ahead and look at our data again. So let's go ahead and create a pivot table. Step number 1 is to go ahead and click somewhere within your data. It doesn't matter if I'm on A3, it doesn't matter if I'm on A14, just click somewhere in your data. Then you're going to click on Insert, you're going to click on Pivot Table, and if you'll notice that it has that rotating Vegas line around it saying that, is this really what you want to be working with? Yes, this is the data we want unsummarized, so we're going to go ahead and do OK. Now, there are many ways to do pivot tables. This tells you here to drop row fields here and drop value fields here. You can certainly do that if you like. I tend to just go, I want my rows to be miles, and I want it to count how many there are. Now, if you'll notice, I just dropped and dragged both of those to the bottom, but in doing so, it ended up showing that I have 6,017,000 data points, which isn't a true statement. So if you'll notice on your right, it says sum of miles. Well, we don't want sum of miles, we want count of miles. There are 2 ways to change this. One of the easiest ways is to just click on sum of values, click on value field settings, and change it to count. Voila, you'll see that that went ahead and changed it. The other way of doing it was summarize values by, and that's on your top piece up here. Next thing that we can do is we want to make a chart out of that. So let's go ahead, and if we notice up on the right hand side, we're in the pivot table tools. Under options, there's a pivot chart. So I can go ahead and create a pivot chart that will graph that for us. Well, that's good, fine, and dandy, but it would be nice to just have more of a summary. Most of the time you don't have 12 plus bars on a chart. So we're going to head and group it. So again, there are two ways to group selections. I tend to use my right click. My right click, I want to group my selection, and I want to start at 50,000, and I want to summarize it by every 3,000 miles. And what you'll notice is that when I did that, both my chart and my graph changed without me having to do anything besides simply stating what I wanted. The other way of doing it is doing group selection up here. And I could say, boss comes in, wants it by every 5,000. Okay, there we have it by every 5,000. So both of the charts are now, the chart and the histogram, or in this case it's still a bar chart, are listed that way. So next, what we're going to do is I want it to actually be every 3,000 to match what we had done in the previous slides. So our chart looks exactly the same without having us to do anything else, but our graph does not. So how do we fix our graph? Well, if you notice, as soon as I clicked in the graph, the pivot chart tools came out, which I can now design, layout, format, analyze. I can do a lot of things. But I will tell you that I don't want this in my printout of it. So if I click on it and then right click, I can do hide all value field settings. And it took them away. Now it's starting to look a lot more like the chart that I had provided. This total here doesn't really add a lot to it, so I'm going to go ahead and take that one out as well. Let's go ahead and change the title of this one. So this was Tire Life. Now I want to go to Layout on the top. I want to add our access points. So our access titles, title below access, and I'm going to go ahead and say number of miles. Now if you'll notice, I just started typing, and when I hit the enter key, it completed it there. I could have also double clicked down below to do the same thing. So then I want to insert a vertical title, and I'm going to go ahead and do a rotated title that way and just start typing and say that's going to be frequency. So this looks almost exactly like the chart we did, except for there's still space between the bars. So how do we get rid of the space? One way of doing it is to go ahead and click on the data set, right click on it, go ahead and do Format Data Series. Now if you'll notice on here, there's lots of different options over here, but we want the gap width to be changed over here. So we're going to go ahead and change gap width to 0. And lo and behold, we have the exact same chart that we had seen in the previous slide. When you have larger fields, and so you're working with a different data set, such as this one has to deal with sports shoes, so how many numbers of the age of the person is in the first column, annual income, how many pairs they purchase per year, how many number of Nikes they have, how many number of Adidas they have. So lots of interesting data in here. You can do the exact same thing with these. Like if I want to summarize the number of Nike on this one, I can go ahead and do insert pivot table. Again, we got our nice little dazzling lines around the outside that say, is this the data you want to choose? I'll say yes, it certainly is. And we can say that we want the number of Nike. Remember, that was the column we looked at. So we drop it to row labels, we drop it to values, click on it, change it to count, and we see that 100 people were surveyed, 27 of which don't own any Nike, 27 of which own one pair of Nikes, etc. down the line. So there are lots of different and quick and easy ways to do these. So if you need more examples, just open up data sets and you can just start playing with them to see how you can summarize things by count, i.e. frequency charts and graphs.